Jen has ordered a decadent seafood tower, king crab legs, lobster tails, and a waterfall of caviar. Pricey? You bet. But Jen worked with Empower on her savings and investment strategy and planned for splurges like these. She got good at money, so she can be a little bad. Ooh, champagne. Empower. Invest well, live a little. Start today at empower.com.
Past performance is not indicative of future returns. Investing involves risk. You may lose money. Advisory services are provided for a fee by Empower Advisory Group, LLC, EAG, a registered investment advisor with the Securities and Exchange Commission. OMG, those shrimps are really jumbo.
This episode is brought to you by Polestar. There's only one true way to experience the all-electric luxury SUV Polestar 3, and that's to take a test drive. It can go from 0 to 60 in as little as 4.8 seconds with the dynamic handling of a sports car. But to truly understand how it commands the road, you need to be behind the wheel. Up to 350 miles of range, the 3D surround sound system by Bowers & Wilkins. It's all something you have to experience to believe. So book your test drive for Polestar 3 today at polestar.com.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Hey everyone, this is Andrew Zink, the host of the Ghost of Tsushima Yotei Gamecast. I want to welcome you to the show and let you know that you can reach out to us via email or find us on Blue Sky. All of the links are in the show notes. You can join the Robots Radio Discord to chat with us directly, and you can listen to this podcast on any podcasting platform that you listen to. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show. Welcome, fellow samurai, villagers, and anybody else to episode 4 of the Ghost of Tsushima Gamecast. I am your host, Andrew Zink. Super excited for episode 4, Act 1, Ally Missions. So this podcast episode is going to cover all of the missions that you can do for the allies you recruit for the main story. As I mentioned in the previous 2 episodes about Act 1's main story, you recruit your allies and you only have to do the first mission in this game to have them proceed to help you get out of Act 1, but they all have extra missions that you can do for them. So this episode is going to cover all those missions, and we're going to start with Sensei Ishikawa, who, if you've played the game or if you just listened to the other episodes, you might remember or know that this is the master archer who, you did the first quest with. And so his first quest is called The Tale of Sensei Ishikawa. And so I'm not going to redo this whole quest because we covered this in episode 2 of the podcast, but I'll just do a brief summary. So this is the main questline podcast for Ishikawa, and you go find him at his dojo in Hiyoshi Springs. That's in Hiyoshi Prefecture, which is close to Castle Kaneda. So you discover him there and find that a fight happened. Eventually, you talk to him and you help him track his missing student Tomoe. And after fighting through a Mongol fort, you discover that Tomoe has actually joined the Mongols and is teaching them archery skills. So, Sensei Ishikawa is obviously pretty upset by this, and, he and Jin kind of bond over the course of this mission. And by the end, they are agreed that, that Jin will help Ishikawa, find Tomoe, and that Ishikawa will help him at Castle Kaneda. So, all the quests for Sensei Ishikawa in Act 1 that center around Tomoe will take place in and around Hiyoshi Springs in the Hiyoshi Prefecture. So moving on to, the next quest, it's called The Sensei and the Student. So you meet Ishikawa at his dojo, and it's sunset. once again, we mentioned this previously in previous episodes, but the dojo, it kind of sits on top of a mountain that overlooks Hiyoshi Springs. Very beautiful. So you meet Ishikawa there. So then a cutscene starts in which Ishikawa calls Tomoe a born killer and just says a lot of ominous sounding things about her. Jin is kind of saying, "Oh, well, I've encountered killers before," and Ishikawa says, "No, you haven't. Not like this." So that sort of thing, really dressing Jin down about the seriousness of the situation. So Jin and Ishikawa they start walking out to a nearby archery range where Ishikawa was told by a local that they saw Mongols training. So you're not on horseback, you're walking, and you're kind of just walking from the dojo across this small mountain. So Ishikawa believes that Tomoe is with the Mongols who are doing archery training at this range nearby. And so, on this walk, Jin is saying to Ishikawa that Tomoe could make a powerful ally. And Ishikawa is pretty much insisting that she will never join them and that she's made her choice already. And Jin keeps insisting and trying to push back on it, saying that maybe she can do right. But Ishikawa is pretty adamant that that's not the case and that Tomoe is a lost cause. So kind of interesting just to see the difference between them, on this one issue. So eventually you scale a cliff and you get up there, and there's a bunch of arrows, and it's kind of like an archer perch, and it's kind of for training. So then right across the way from this hill that the cliff that you just climbed to the top to, you can walk over there. It's like a grass field, and you see a small watchtower, and it's on the peak of another hill, basically on this mountain range, and you see an archery range in front of this small watchtower. So presumably this is a place you wanted to go. Again, this isn't a huge quest. None of these quests are as big or as long as the main story quests. So Ishikawa tells you that the Mongols are long gone. Like it's one of those things. It's one of those video game things. He takes one look at it and he says, "Oh, the Mongols are long gone. So why don't you go over to check it out, and you can train and shoot some arrows at the archery range while you're there." So as soon as you arrive, you investigate, and you can see that the Mongols had a severed head in a bag that was like pinned up for target practice. So obviously pretty gruesome stuff there. And so then like right away you hear a horn blow, and then 6 or so Mongols come running out of the watchtower right there. So obviously they're not gone. And they attack you, and then you have to fight them off. And this whole time Ishikawa does not help you. In addition to there being 6 Mongols, there was actually a sheepdog too. And throughout the first episode 2 and 3 covering Act 1's main story of this, we didn't talk that much about a ton of gameplay and specific things, but there have been sheepdogs up to this point throughout the game, and this is one of those cases. They're not super hard to defeat. You just have to dodge and try and kill them at range and figure it out. So Ishikawa does not help you in this fight at all. And as soon as you finish it, a cutscene starts where Ishikawa tells Jin that he knew the Mongols were there and he wanted to test him. And you see how he responds to an ambush. And Jin is kind of annoyed and says, like, this isn't a game, and this is like war isn't a test. But Ishikawa kind of responds harshly as a teacher. And eventually they share a laugh about it, but it does maybe give you an insight into why Tomoe wanted to run away from Ishikawa in the first place. And Jin actually says, I see why she attacked you. And, that's what makes Ishikawa laugh. So, just some funny context there. And I always love when there's banter, especially when it can be funny at certain times. So that's always an added bonus. So after this, you start following tracks away from this small watchtower on the archery range. And Jin says, it's a dozen men, maybe more. So eventually it leads you to a group of Mongols at like a small group of houses. And you're still on this same mountain range. Like you're pretty much just walking across this small mountain range where there's a couple different hills and, houses and cliff tops and stuff like that. And so they've been practicing shooting their bows at innocent captives. You can kind of see this there, and Jin and Ishikawa comment on it. So, eventually you clear the Mongols at this small group of houses, and you can do it via stealth, or you can just confront them, do a standoff. Same as the rest of the game so far. It's really up to you how you proceed through it. And eventually you free a captured villager, and you ask the villager if a woman was with them, and the villager is shocked, and he says, "Yeah, there was a Japanese woman here, and she was giving the Mongols orders," and he kind of can't believe it. So Jin, asks if the villager heard anything that might be useful, and the villager just says, "Oh, I heard the woman say something about the sensei and the hot springs." So obviously, leading up to what Sensei Ishikawa has already stated in the main quest, that he thinks that Hiyoshi Falls is going to be the next to fall to the Mongol attack, and they're going to go after it. So, you talk to Ishikawa in the final cutscene of this quest and tell him what you found out. And he says Tomoe is just getting started, and again, makes it sound very ominous. And then he starts to talk to Jin about the way that Jin fights. And he says, the way you fight isn't how your uncle fights, Lord Shimura, and it's not how I fight. And he's essentially saying it's not honorable. And then he says, you dart around like a thief, and I don't want to train another monster like Tomoe. And Jin says, obviously, I'm not going to end up like that. I want to help people and save people, and kind of seems to reassure, Ishikawa a bit. And then the quest basically ends with them preparing for the attack on Hiyoshi Springs. So, at this point, the quest is over. You can start the next one. And again, I think for a lot of people, you may just bounce back and forth on the map or check it out. We're just going to jump right into the next quest here with Ishikawa. The next quest is called The Past Never Passes. And again, you meet Ishikawa right at his dojo. So these are all kind of taking place in the same vicinity of each other. So the weather for this quest is kind of rainy and cloudy, stormy weather. So Ishikawa informs you that travelers are being shot dead on the roads in and out of the springs. And he says to you that Tomoe is using the archery tactics that he taught her to isolate Hiyoshi Springs. And he says that, a couple well-placed archers can isolate a whole town and cause disruption. And, that's exactly the type of thing he taught at Clan Nagao when he was the archery master there. So Ishikawa says they'll turn that to their advantage by thinking like Tomoe. And from this point, you enter into the survey mode that you've done before through the main story at this point from the dojo cliff. And you're basically just surveying the roads and guessing, where Tomoe might post up and where the best places to be would be. So, you look at the main road leading into town, and Ishikawa says that wouldn't be a target because people are already avoiding it. And then, there's a path behind the inn, that Jin says, oh, maybe it's there. And Ishikawa says, no, there's no cover there, and there's poor visibility. So that wouldn't be a good place to ambush people. And then you identify a road that leads to the coast from Hiyoshi Springs, and a bridge leading into town on the other side of the town, and then a southern pathway that runs along a high ridge where arrows can be rained down. And for all three of those locations, Sensei Ishikawa says, "Oh yeah, that those are all correct. Those would be good places, and that's gonna be where Tomoe is." So this was just a little bit insightful because it's showing that Ishikawa is giving Jin some archery advice and functioning as a teacher. I have to say, I don't know. I kind of look at a lot of this just as common sense personally, but they're just setting that up thematically, and it's cool to see. So, as they're walking to the first location, which is the coastal road, Ishikawa tells Jin that he held nothing back from Tomoe about his story. And they start to talk about what happened with Ishikawa at Clan Nagao and why Ishikawa, left and didn't stay on as the archery master. So Ishikawa just says he retired, but Jin says that his uncle, Lord Shimura, told him that something happened with Ishikawa. And he says that his uncle said that he got too close with a commoner, and that, and implies there was some sort of scandal. And Ishikawa laughs it off and says, well, your uncle has a way of, telling stories, or, something like that. So, you can tell there's clearly, again, some backstory here that you're not getting the full sense of. And we kind of experienced a similar thing with Ryuzo throughout the 2 or 3, Straw Hat Ronin quests you did, where they're dropping these little breadcrumbs about what's happening in the story. And, you just slowly get information as you complete the quest. So eventually, you reach the coastal road, and it's kind of going through a it's semi-wooded, but it's with grasslands around it. And so obviously the Mongols are posted up there, and like there's a couple of high rocks and stuff like that they're standing on. I have to say I didn't think it was a spectacular ambush spot, but they're just trying to isolate the town, I guess. So there's like, I don't know, 6 or 7 Mongols there. And you clear them all, and then eventually you just kind of move past it. And there's a lot of tall grass in this area, so you can do it via stealth, or you can just engage them, same as the rest of the game. So, after you finish this and you start moving on to the next part of the quest, which is going to be the bridge on the other side of the town, Jin and Ishikawa start talking about the Mongols offering Tomoe power, wealth, and status, and how she switched sides, and just kind of talking with each other about how those are things that she didn't have growing up, as she was born just in what would be considered like a low-class villager at the time. And the Mongol invasion and her skills kind of give her an opportunity to rise up through the ranks and move on. And I have to say, I actually find this storyline really fascinating, because in one of the previous episodes, I talked about the Mongol boats, right? And how, like, most people in their life in this time, like, you might see 1 or 2 big boats sailing around, but to see hundreds of huge Mongol troop transports, that's just something like you would only see once in a lifetime, really. And it's almost the equivalent of it if you were a common person. Travel isn't as accessible, information about the world isn't as accessible, and with the Mongols just sweeping in, it's like, here's an opportunity to be able to essentially travel the world, travel all around and see different things and have more information about the world and gain more status and power. And I almost equate it to, like, if someone just dropped into your life and gave you the opportunity to just like permanently roam the world on a private jet or a huge yacht, or something like that. And it's like, it's just something that fundamentally would transform your life and your access and your status and things like that. And I think they really do a good job of making Tomoe feel a little bit relatable. Obviously it's not relatable because she's killing innocent villagers and obviously taking a very sad path alongside the Mongols in their warmongering. But I just thought it was cool that they're not just making her some sort of one-faced villain. They're trying to add some complexity to her so far. So then they talk about good values and everything, and Ishikawa, talks about Lord Shimura, and at this point, Jin says that Shimura would show mercy to people, and Jin is kind of playing like the good guy in this role, and Ishikawa actually laughs at him and says, like, Jin says something cheesy about showing people mercy and everything. Ishikawa says, "Oh, where'd you get that from, Sun Tzu?" And Ishikawa then says that Lord Shimura only showed mercy to people who posed no danger to him, but that Ishikawa at least feels that Shimura did not always show mercy to people who were a threat. So, just again, interesting to hear the back and forth and see the different perspectives that they each have on the situation. So eventually you arrive at the bridge that leads into the town, and you find, again, another group of Mongols posted up there. So there's a bunch of Mongols on the ground with melee weapons blocking the bridge, but then there's also 4 or 5 Mongols up on the ridge overlooking the bridge. So I did find dispatching the Mongols on the ridge a little more difficult, because they're obviously looking straight down at you, and there's a bunch of them, so you can take a lot of hits as you're trying to fight them. But eventually, overall, I don't think this is a super hard game, and you dispatch them and you clear the area. So then after you clear that bridge, you've now cleared 2 out of the 3 areas for this quest, and the final one is on the southern road that leads into the Hiyoshi Springs. And they say this was the spot with a ridge running along it that would make it like a great place to rain arrows down. So you get there. It's not a huge ridge, honestly. Like I'd say it's only like 10 feet tall or something. It wasn't huge, but you clear the Mongols, and after you're done with that, there's one Mongol who's left alive at the end. And I think this is really the first time this happens, where the Mongol speaks to you and says, "Oh, wait, I have a message." So then Ishikawa says, "Speak," and he says, "I have a message for Ishikawa specifically." And so then after he gives a message, he says, "Hiyoshi Springs will beg for mercy, like the victims of Hiranori Nagao." And right away, Ishikawa gets super triggered and just shoots him with an arrow at point blank range and kills him. So then there's a final cutscene that starts with this quest, and they talk about what happened, and Jin is obviously a little bit startled. Ishikawa just lost it like that. And Ishikawa says that Tomoe is spreading lies and that she wants to divide them. And then Jin says, well, that may be true, but there's often a seed of truth that exists around a lie. And in the Hiranori Nagao story, he says that, what everyone says is that he was talented with a bow and he died fighting bandits. So at this point, Ishikawa says, well, that was decades ago and it doesn't matter now. And so they agree to end the conversation basically with Ishikawa saying, we're the only people standing between Hiyoshi Springs and a bloodbath. That's what we need to focus on. So that's the end of that quest there. Again, they're leading up to this, what sounds like checkered history that, Ishikawa might have with.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
If you went on a road trip and you didn't stop for a Big Mac or drop a crispy fry between the car seats or use your McDonald's bag as a placemat, then that wasn't a road trip. It was just a really long drive. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating McDonald's.
Clan Nagao and how he ended up where he is. And somehow it seems like Tomoe knows some of this and is involved. Obviously, Ishikawa said earlier in the quest that he told Tomoe everything about his story. So just interesting that, it's clearly leading somewhere. So then the final quest for Act 1 of Sensei Ishikawa's storyline here is called The Way of the Bow. And once again, you meet Ishikawa at the dojo to plan the defense of Hiyoshi Springs. And it starts with a very pretty sunset. That's how this whole quest takes place on underneath us, pretty sunset. And then a cutscene starts where Ishikawa says that Tomoe wants Hiyoshi Springs specifically to humiliate him, and she wants to conquer it to prove her worth to the Mongols. So he then says that they should let Tomoe take the town and let her get overconfident with it. But Jin immediately says, I mean, if they take the town, won't they kill everyone? And, then that's like, and won't they burn it? And then that's just not good. And so Jin convinces them and says, like, there's no way. So they agree to mount a defense, of the town. So then Ishikawa says that she will attack it from the north, and they start to hash out battle plans. And then again, you hear like a horn, and you get ambushed at the dojo by the Mongols. So you fight them off, and then after you win, you realize that the attack is beginning. You run down from the dojo, and Ishikawa makes Jin swear to keep hunting Tomoe if he were to die. And Jin says that he will keep the Way of the Bow alive, no matter what. So, I just thought it was interesting that Jin is it's kind of established that Jin is now like Ishikawa's next student, basically, throughout the course of these couple quests that you've done. 4 in total, counting the main one. So Ishikawa says that they're going to strike near the waterfalls at the back of the town because it's the most vulnerable point. So Jin says that they can get there quickly and prepare a defense and kind of dig in at that spot. So as you get close to there, you find 2 villagers, and you tell them to gather all the people who live in Hiyoshi Springs and gather them at the inn and to stay out of sight and take cover. So they do that. You arrive at the waterfall spot, and then you survey the battlefield again. And similar to when you hit the first fort in the main quest with Ishikawa, you see hornets' nests, explosive barrels, and dry grass you can light on fire. I do find the hornet's nest to be really funny, that there's just like hornet's nest just laying around, out and about and all over Japan. I wonder, I mean, maybe that's the case, and I should do some historical research on it, but that's funny. And then the explosive barrels, it's just like, oh, all right, very conveniently placed explosive barrels right where the Mongols are going to happen to be running through to attack this town. But those are just funny video game things that happen. This is an awesome game, all in all. So at this point, something really cool happens. You get the flaming arrows, from doing this, and so that's really cool. The flaming arrows are awesome. So Mongols then start coming down the hill, and it's like a narrow path. And you hear a horn. They start coming down the hill, and it's pretty easy to pick them off with your arrows for a while. And then they have to approach you over this open field, where you can hit the hornet's nest, be exploding the barrels, lighting the grass on fire, not to mention just shooting the Mongols. And you got Ishikawa there to help you, so you're hugely outnumbered, and they keep coming in waves. But this is a super fun fight, all in all. Just because of the setup. So eventually, you fight your way through the couple waves, you win the fight, and that ends up being that. And so then you look up, and like kind of a cutscene starts, and you look up to the top of the dojo. And you can see Tomoe actually up there. This is the first time we've seen Tomoe in person as a character in the game. And she seems to be wearing a mask, and you can't really see her face. You can't really make out any specific features on her. And the Nagao banners that Ishikawa keeps at his dojo are burning, and Tomoe is burning them. So she's looking down, kind of like standing next to the burning banners, pumping her arms. You can't see her face. Jin wants to go after her, and Ishikawa says it'll be like she'll be long gone by the time we get there, and that she just wants to humiliate him and mock him, and that they'll eventually catch up to him. So, yeah, I just wanted to say on this, and again, I say this with deep love for this game. This was just one of the particularly goofy parts of this game where, and maybe it's just me, but something about the way that you look up and she's just like, like jeering and pumping her arms up and down while the banners burn. And, I kind of thought like you'd think she would have just burned the whole dojo, but that didn't happen. And then when Ishikawa says, oh, she'll be long gone by the time we get there, like it really wasn't that far away. And in the game, like there's been plenty of times you've been doing these side quests and you run from the dojo like down to Hiyoshi Springs, and it's only like a couple minutes run, like it's not super long. So I kind of thought like, oh my god, can't we go get her right now? And it actually reminded me of a quest way back in the day playing Assassin's Creed 2, where I might be jogging some memories for some of the listeners here, but there was a time where I think it's when you get to Venice or something, and there's 4 of your targets that you're seeking, 4 Templar targets, and they're all meeting up, and they're all on this bridge next to each other at the same time, and they don't let you go kill them. And if you try it, like it says you failed the mission, you're supposed to just listen. And what happens is eventually like they talk, and then the screen like cuts to black and comes back, and then Ezio says like, oh, darn it, I lost them. I lost sight of them. And I always just thought that was just like the most frustrating, ridiculous thing, because it's like, really, you spend the next like 10 hours of Assassin's Creed 2 hunting these 4 guys, and you could have just gotten them on the bridge all at one point right there. So, but it's fine. It's games. We have fun with this. So, yeah, at this point, Ishikawa, in the final cutscene here for Ishikawa's storyline in Act 1, he reveals to you that he trained Hironori Nagao. And Jin is a bit mad because, Ishikawa has withheld information and not been totally honest. So Ishikawa says that eventually he kind of blames himself. And he says that he was young and callous and rash, decades ago. And he says that Ishikawa like picked up on that and modeled himself after that, and that led Hiranori to lead a rebellion against the clan. So again, Hiranori Nagao leads a rebellion against Clan Nagao, and apparently they fought off the rebellion, but some of Lord Nagao's best soldiers were killed, and they blamed Ishikawa as his teacher for Hiranori being led astray. And they then invent a story of Hiranori Nagao being killed at the hands of bandits to protect Lord Nagao's legacy and to hide, just any shame or humiliation of internal strife there. And that's essentially, and Ishikawa says, I was allowed the honor of resigning my position and going into exile as opposed to, being killed or something like that. And so Jin is very understanding and, kind about it. And he says, well, we saved the people of Hiyoshi Springs and you can be proud of that, basically. And then Sensei Ishikawa calls Jin Sakai formally his student. And that wraps up the end of Ishikawa's quest line in Act 1. This quest line will continue in Act 2, and we will pick that up, in our Act 2 episodes. So at this point, the next quest lines we're going to move on to are Lady Masako Adachi's quest lines. So again, in the main storyline, her first quest is called The Tale of Lady Masako. And just to do, again, another brief overview of this is the one where you go to the Adachi estate in the Ariake prefecture, and, you get ambushed by some assassins, you follow them out, and you follow some tracks, and you find her, and Lady Masako brings you to the grave of her family and tells you that, her family's all been assassinated and massacred by Japanese traitors. She takes you to the Golden Temple. You track a monk named Sogen to an assassin's camp, and I guess Sogen was part of the assassins and, helped them to commit the massacre. She kills Sogen, and you discover the list of conspirators of people who wanted to replace Clan Adachi. And so the next 3 or 4 quests for Lady Masako, the exact same thing as with Sensei Ishikawa. They all take place in one local area, and this is the Ariake prefecture and around the Golden Temple. So, we've been there before, and we covered the Lady Masako quest in the previous episode. If you want to listen to it, you can go listen to episode 2 on that. So then the first side quest for Lady Masako is called the Headman. So you start a cutscene with Lady Masako, and she says that Sadao, who is the headman of Kuta Farmstead, was at the top of the list of conspirators. And, they say that Jin says that Kuta's people served them, and that she doesn't understand, and he doesn't understand why he would betray them. And Masako says that, yeah, my husband appointed him as the headman, but he betrayed us anyway, and that he fled Kuta the night of the attack. And she says that he is a cunning snake. But she then says that he has a brother named Hachi. And that Hachi, she says, Hachi is a fool and just passed by carting food for refugees. So you agree to set out and follow Hachi, hoping that he meets up with Sadao, or gives you some other clue. Just a quick side note here. I love the term fool, and when people say it like this, it's just like, Hachi is a fool, It's not specific, but you get a very it gives you just a very specific meaning in a sense. So I just found that comical. So yeah, you walk for a bit through the Ariake prefecture, and you eventually arrive at a fork in the road, and there's no more golden trees at this point, but you're still in the Ariake prefecture. So that's just cool. The Ariake has different sections in it. And after looking around, you can spot his cart going one direction, and you begin another following quest, basically. So Hachi's taking his horse. He's talking to his horse the whole time, and I actually thought that was funny. I thought they had some just funny, relatable commentary in there between them. And so then eventually it looks like he's getting held up by bandits, and the bandits want to look through his cart, and he seems kind of scared. But then it seems like they know each other, and the bandits want sake, but Hachi says, "Oh, I only have food," and he hands them a note, and he says, "Give this note to your guest." So clearly they know each other, and then Hachi basically starts to leave. At this point, Masako says, "All right, forget the wagon. Let's follow the bandits on their horses and see where they lead us." So then you continue the following quest of the bandits on their horses, and again, I thought they had really funny dialogue where they call Hachi an idiot, and then one of the bandits says, "Oh, well, he's the headman's brother," and the other bandit on the horse says, "He's still an idiot." And I just thought it was funny the way they executed in the game. And so then they say that the note is very important. So then you keep listening to them talk, and the bandits say that Headman Sadao hired his cousins, who are bandits, apparently, to kill protesters after a food shortage at Kuta Farmstead. And the bandit on the horse says, so, like, whenever you think of Headman Sadao, think of the Kuta Farmstead massacre. So again, they're really giving you the sense that Headman Sadao is not a good guy. Not a good guy at all. And so, you keep following him through the woods, and eventually you end up at like a woodcutter's house. And this is the bandit hideout. And there's like a couple buildings here. And so you talk with Masako for a little bit, and then she just decides to run out and fight him head on. And I gotta say, I love Lady Masako's character. Like, every quest, she just does not care, and she just runs out and fights people. And hey, I love it. I mean, she wants to avenge her family, and who wouldn't, So, yeah, eventually you clear the bandits. It's not a super hard fight. There's an archer or two on the roofs of the buildings around there. And then you talk with Lady Masako, and it's, again, I think they do a good job of, like, the dialogue is serious, but it is also comical at times. And so Jin says to her, "Masako, corpses can't answer questions. Like, we're trying to get information here, and everybody we come across, we just kill them because you're so mad." And so then you hear someone like crying from inside a house. Sounds like a woman's voice. And Jin says to her, "You stay out here. I'm going to go inside and talk to her because we need to make sure she's kept alive and we can learn something." So he goes in, and you find a woman named Hina. And Hina is Sadao's wife. And the note from Hachi is delivered to Hina, and it says Sadao has to hide because Lady Masako survived the massacre, and they might now know that he was involved. So the quest ends with them deciding to bring Hina back to the estate, and Masako definitely wants to hurt her. and Jin says to her, "Don't worry, no harm will come to you." And again, I thought this was really funny. Like, then Jin and Masako look at each other and exchange this, like, and Masako is giving him this, like, really mad, "Why'd you say that?" look, and Jin's giving her this, "We need information, stop killing everyone" look. And so just, again, kind of just a funny scene in the game. So this wraps up the quest, the Headman. And at this point, there's only 2 quests left in Lady Masako's storyline for Act 1. The next quest is going to be called The Husband. And so you start the quest at the Adachi estate again. And Masako says that Hina won't talk because she keeps crying. So Jin says, "Okay, I'll try talking to her." So then there's a cutscene with Jin talking to Hina. And Jin says he needs to know where Sadao is because he won't kill Sadao, and he'll try and protect him. Or he'll still bring him to justice, but, maybe not kill him. But Masako will for sure kill him if she finds him. So he's basically trying to argue to Hina, like, it's in your best interest and Sadao's best interest for me to find Sadao and not Masako. So then, Hina says, "Well, let me think about it." And it just the screen kind of cuts to black, and then the cutscene ends, and Hina just has her face in her hands, like, crying. And Jin says, "Okay, I'll be back." So you leave the house at the Adachi estate, and you go talk to Masako. You're still on the estate here. And you talk about, like, how you said you wouldn't let Sadao be killed. And, and then Masako says, like, "Yeah, but I'm going to kill him." And Jin says, "I know, but, I'm going to try, and, I'm not going to be able to stop you." So just interesting, because it is kind of showing, like, this may sound harsh, but a little bit of a deterioration of Jin's honor here. Like, he knows he's making a promise that is not going to be able to be kept, but, you know, he's just doing it because he needs to move this forward. And, you know, obviously I don't think he has a ton of sympathy for traitors who slaughtered, like, you know, children and innocents basically for power. So, you know, you talk to Lady Masako about this, and you walk over to a beautiful cliff. And again, this is a moment that really becomes quite sad. And Lady Masako is just talking about the loss of her family and how, you know, as she walks around the estate, like, she's just plagued by memories of, you know, her family, her grandchildren running around. And, you know, you kind of take a knee at a cliff and you're looking out over just an incredible view and talking about it. And Lady Masako says that in the spot that you're kneeling, her grandchildren would make songs here and they would play music. And, you know, she's just expressing how deeply traumatized and sad that she is. And so I thought this was an incredibly beautiful scene where you can then swipe over on your PlayStation controller and you can play the flute for Lady Masako. And you just play like a short, like 30-second, you know, flute song. And it's just a moment, again, in this game where you can really just put the controller down and just listen to this beautiful, soothing music. And there's just this incredible view. And you're in the midst of incredible tragedy, but the game is still showing you that there's beauty in the world. And I found that to be incredibly meaningful. So, and it reminded me a lot, actually, of The Last of Us Part 2, where, you know, you can play the guitar in that game. And actually, in the recently released PC version, I think you can play other instruments too. But so I thought that was cool. And both The Last of Us Part 2 and Ghost of Tsushima were released in 2020. So just cool that, you know, Sony was and these two game studios, Naughty Dog and Sucker Punch, were kind of doing the same thing of just incorporating some instruments in there. So then this moment is broken up and you hear Hina screaming. So you run inside, and of course, Hina's dead. That's just the most, like, you know, video game thing ever. Your only lead is dead, and then you have to, you know, the quest gets drawn out. So you follow the tracks out of the Adachi estate, and Masako says on the way that she might have made sure that people saw Hina with her, taking her back to the estate. And maybe the assassins would know to come to the estate and kill her, so then they could follow the assassins. And of course, Jin is, you know, a little upset and is like, you know, you basically got Hina killed on purpose. And Masako basically just says, yeah, sorry, not sorry. And that's the end of it. So on the way, you know, Jin says to Lady Masako, whatever we find up ahead, we need the killers alive. We're trying to get information here. Please don't kill them. And again, like, I don't know if the game developer is meant for this to be funny for us as the audience. I found this to be a very funny just quest line that was playing out. Just the dynamic between the two of them. And I love Jin and Masako as a pair. You know, I just find them both to be very relatable, and they just have some good chemistry and rapport between each other. So, you know, you eventually arrive to, like, a cemetery, and you find Mongols there. And apparently, I think this is by chance, but the Mongols have just run into Hachi, and they've got him, like, on the ground, and Hachi's injured, and they've, like, looked through his, you know, his wagon for whatever supplies and everything. So then you eliminate the Mongols with Lady Masako, and you talk to Hachi. And Hachi says, yeah, I was the one who tried to free her, but she wouldn't leave because she wouldn't betray Sadao. And it seems like Hachi...
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
Using a Clorox disinfecting wipe to clean that stuck-on sauce from the stove feels like...
Oh, boy. That tickles. Stop.
It feels like coming home to your needy corgi after a long day.
Best part of the day, finally.
With Clorox. Clean feels carefree. Clean feels good. Use as directed.
Like, didn't want to kill her, but it sounds like things might have just gotten out of hand and it just happened by accident. And then he says that he failed Sadao. And, Lady Masako is like asking for information. And he says, I won't betray my brother. And then he dies. And I just have to say, this was just another video game thing I just thought was so hilarious. Like, he says his last words and he just says, I won't betray my brother. And then he just goes, ah! And he just like keels over and dies. So just, again, a very funny video game thing that happens right there. And then Masako starts screaming at his dead body. You can't die. You can't die. I need you. And so again, like, they do a really good job of just showing you how deeply committed Lady Masako is to vengeance and justice. And again, on this podcast, I try and cover what's happening, also point out just some of my experiences and keep it fun and lighthearted. But I think this game does a good job of, having there be comical moments that then can become really serious and impactful. And just trying to reflect all that as we go through this podcast. So, yeah, and then the last part of this quest, you find a map on his body of supply routes to survivor camps that he's been taking food to. And they think that, Hachi knew that Sadao might be hiding somewhere and that maybe the location is on the map. So Jin says that he'll go to the survivor camp in Ariake, and Masako says that she'll bury Hina. So that is the end of this quest, The Husband. And that only leaves one final quest for Lady Masako's storyline, and then actually only one final quest after that for all of the main ally characters in Act 1. So the final quest for Lady Masako's storyline is called the Traitor. And so, you arrive at the Ariake survivor camp and you meet Junshin. And that was a monk you actually could meet at Golden Tower, or at Golden Temple. And he's at the Ariake refugee survivor camp. So you talk to him and it's a beautiful nighttime setting. And there's clear skies and just super bright moonlight everywhere. And so Jin asks him to look at the map. And, Junshin says, I set up all these camps, make sure people have food and have a place to go. And, so Jin asks him to look at the map and he asks him if there's anything that's on the map that isn't a survivor camp. And Junshin almost kind of expresses some hesitation to help because he just doesn't want to be a part of bloodshed or anything. And, he says that he's heard that Japanese have been fighting Japanese in Ariake, and that's really sad. And Jin says that there's Japanese traitors and that Clan Adachi was massacred and betrayed and that he's trying to bring the perpetrators to justice. So, so then at that point, Junshin agrees to help, basically. And he says that the Ariake lighthouse on the coast is marked on the map and that he's heard that bandits have taken it over. So at this point, Lady Masako arrives and they talk. And she says, and Jin gives her the information, and she says that Clan Adachi built the lighthouse for the people of Ariake, and that Headman Sadao just truly has no shame to hole up at a place that, her family built. And I just want to take a moment and say I really sympathize with this, where, just moments in life where it feels like someone really is acting in good faith and other people just aren't. And, I really sympathize with like the rage and vengeance you can feel in a moment like that. So Jin then says to her, it's going to be heavily armed and guarded and that they need to be careful. And Masako basically just says, I don't care. Like, we're running in there. Very Lady Masako. That's very, very Lady Masako. So then you ride a short distance and you end up at the lighthouse. And like literally the moment you get within range, Masako screams, Sadao, I've come for your head. And she just sprints forward carrying her sword. And so, and there's like, I don't know, 10 or 12 bandits, with arrows are posted up, and she just does not care. So, you can do another 6 standoff to start the fight. And I just want to say here, there was just this moonlight setting that was so beautiful as the fight is happening. And, eventually you clear the bandits and you can then look out at the whole ocean, and it's just bathed in this beautiful, clear skies and moonlight and just an incredible nighttime atmosphere. Truly, I feel like this is just an all-time game for environmental settings and atmospheres and such. So then you clear the bandits, and Lady Masako kind of runs into the lighthouse ahead of you. And as you're like climbing up the ladder to get to the top of the lighthouse, you hear Sadao saying like, "You should have died with your family." And then you hear her say, "I wish I had." And then you hear him die and get killed, basically. So then you get to the top of the ladder. Obviously, Lady Masako is standing over his body, and they just exchange some words about like, why would Sadao do this, and just what reckless hatred it was that led him to do this, and how much sadness and death has come out of that. And again, I have to say, on a spiritual level, I really just identified with this. And again, I mentioned The Last of Us Part 2 once or twice in this episode. That's a theme that's really reinforced in The Last of Us Part 2, just the cycle of violence and such. And it does leave you, there's moments in life where it leaves you like, why are people doing this? And what is this all for? So I really sympathize with this and just the way they were talking about it. And so then Jin and Lady Masako, again, they have a really, I felt, kind of emotional conversation where Jin tells her that, he kind of wished he had died on Komoda Beach, and that he had watched like all his fellow samurai lords and everyone he knew just get massacred around him at Komoda Beach. And he says that's why he threw himself into an unwinnable battle against Khotun Khan, totally outnumbered and knowing that he probably wouldn't win. But that, he realized that there's people alive who are counting on him and on her, and that they need to keep fighting for justice and to make the world a better place, and that he wants to protect the people that he cares about, and that's why he keeps going. And so, they kind of share words about that. And I have to say, by the end of this conversation, I really felt like, there was a bond there, and like they had both grown a bit as characters. And again, like there's some things in this game that can be a little goofy, but then there's moments like this where I do find them to be impactful, and I really like that about the game. So this is the last quest for Lady Masako in her storyline in Act 1. And, you leave it off with her saying that she's going to track down the other traitors on the list, and that Jin needs to watch out because they know that he's involved now. And then she says she'll help you out at Castle Kaneda. So all in all, I found this to be a really good storyline. You got to see some different places. I love the Ariaka Lighthouse. I love that, they involved the monks at the Golden Temple, that Junshin was involved, at the survivor camp, and you get to meet different people, and, there's some surveying and some tracking and some investigative stuff and some good fights throughout all of it. So I thought the Lady Masako storyline was pretty good all in all. Yeah, and really we only have one quest left for the Act 1 allies, and it's pretty short. It's a quest for Kenji, and that is the sake brewer who helped you rescue Taka from Azamo Bay, if y'all remember that. So the quest for Kenji is called Servant of the People, and you meet him in the Sutsu Prefecture at the Aoi fishing village. So it's a fishing village, and as you might remember, Sutsu is in the southeast corner of the island, and it's a coastal fishing village, or it's like a coastal prefecture. So it makes sense that there would be like people making their livelihood from fishing in that area. And so you meet Kenji, and like right away he says, "Oh, Jin, something bad has happened." And again, like I mentioned this in one of the previous episodes, but Kenji is definitely to me like the comic relief in the game, and he's kind of like Three Stooges almost sort of character. He's like a jester. He's not someone you can take super seriously or trust his word. He always says like, "Oh, I'm an honest sake merchant." And it's like, yeah. So then Jin says to him, "What did you do, Kenji?" Very suspiciously. Again, I thought the delivery was very comical. And Kenji says that the Mongols have been taking all the food from the village in carts. And then like, Jin kind of asks him like, "Well, why are you here? Like, what are you doing here?" And Kenji says, "Well, I've been thinking about what you said, after we rescued Taka, and I wanted to do some good, and I thought that I wanted to help the farmers here." So So then Jin says, okay, well, maybe I can ambush the Mongols when they come to take the food from, the villagers. And Kenji says he can't because they have hostages. So then he says, okay, come with me. I can show you where the drop-off point for the food is. It's on the beach. So then you walk for a little bit, and Kenji said that most places got too dangerous after being connected to Jin after they rescued Taka by the Mongols. That's part of why he ended up at this village. He thought it would be remote and out of the way and that no one would find him, and he could just hide out there and help them out however he could. So Kenji shows him to the food and drink, and it's just like piled up on the beach, and the Mongols, I guess, are just going to come take it at some point. And he points out an empty sake barrel that Jin can climb inside of to hide. And again, Jin, it's kind of funny. He says, like, why are you always trying to put me inside, barrels? So, they have some banter there. And then, so Jin eventually agrees to hide in the sake barrel. And they say, like, that when the Mongols will come pick it all up, you'll then be in their camp. So Jin agrees to do it. The screen goes black. You hear the Mongols arrive, and they take the barrel. And you then also hear them take Kenji's horse, Miko. And he says, no, Miko, that's my horse. And you hear them, like, smack him. Again, it sounded kind of goofy. It wasn't that serious. But obviously in real life, this would have been a way more serious situation. I mean, if you don't turn over something to people like the Mongols, you could very well just end up dead right then and there. So then you pop out at the Mongol camp, and it's nighttime still. You clear the whole camp. There's some tall grass. The camp is next to a river. And again, you can stealth it. You can fight them head on. You can do whatever you want. There's 10 Mongols or so. And then after clearing the Mongols, you talk to a villager named Taro. And you tell the villager, you take all this food back to the farm. And then the villager, Taro, gets super mad. And he says, like, this is all Kenji's fault, I don't want to see him again. And that comes up. And so right then Kenji arrives and says, oh my God, that was amazing. And, they tell you, Taro says to you that Kenji tried to cut a deal with the Mongols and it got messed up. And that's why the hostages got taken in the first place. Again, this is the type of stuff I'm talking about. I love this in video games, just like this type of character who just can't get anything right and messes everything up. It's just really funny. And so then you ask Kenji and says, Kenji, what did you do? And Kenji says, well, I agreed to sell the Mongols some food, but I packed the barrels full of straw and wood chips so I could save the food for the villagers. And then Jin basically just like, he doesn't call him an idiot, but that's basically what he's saying. And he says, well, don't you think the Mongols would notice when they got back that there was no food or sake in there? And then, Kenji just says, well, I didn't think they would notice so soon. I thought there'd be more time. So, Jin just dresses him down, and Kenji says, I really want to help and make myself useful and help people. And Kenji says, I just need practice at being good at being helpful. So that was funny, and Jin just ends it saying, like, well, don't practice, with people's lives. And yeah, that is the end of this quest at that point. There's a little banter between Taro and Kenji back and forth, just with Taro basically telling Kenji to screw off, and that's the end of it. So yeah, that brings us to the end of what ended up being, I think it's 9 or 11, 9 to 12 different quests if you count the main ones that you have to do to recruit your allies. All in all, I found these various quests to add a lot to the game. It was really cool to feel like you explore the Hiyoshi Springs area with Ishikawa, to explore the Ariake, prefecture with Lady Masako, and then you get to see a little more of Sutsu when you do the Kenji quest at the end. It just fleshes them out as characters and gives you more to play and more to see in the game. So I hope you all enjoyed this episode. In our next episode, we're going to cover just remaining quests that you can do in Act 1 in Izuhara. There's some mythic tales and some other quests that aren't related to any specific characters. And there's just a couple, there's a lot to see in this game. And I'm trying to cover all of it, and it can be a little hard to do. We're already coming up on almost an hour of recording this episode. I cannot believe that I've already recorded, almost 5 hours or more of this game, and we're not even all the way through Act 1. So again, I hope you all are enjoying this. I'm having a really fun time doing this. I'm excited to record the next episode here. Feel free to reach out to us on any of our platforms. Rate the show 5 stars on Spotify or Apple. And remember, if you're considering packing yourself into a sake barrel, make sure you have enough room.